Throughout history, a handful of names rise above the ages, etched in memory, whispered in awe. Among them, few have inspired as many legends as Alexander the Great, born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia. Alexander's arrival marked the dawn of an era that would reshape the known world. But what makes a boy from a remote corner of Greece become a figure whose shadow stretches from the Nile to the Ganges? Before the world would come to know him as a conqueror, he was just a child heir to a turbulent throne, growing up amid the turmoil of feuding Greek city-states, ambitious kings, and ancient prophecies. Alexander was no ordinary prince. His father, King Philip II, was a brilliant strategist who united Macedonia and dreamed of conquering Persia, the greatest empire of his day. His mother, Olympias, was fiercely ambitious and raised her son to believe in his own divine destiny. From birth, stories swirled about omens and dreams predicting greatness. Some whispered he was descended from heroes or even gods. In the smoke-filled halls of Macedon, young Alexander was tutored by Aristotle himself, absorbing the wisdom of philosophers, warriors, and poets. He learned not just how to wield a sword, but how to rule minds, how to imagine a world that could be conquered and changed forever. As we journey through Alexander's rise from boyhood to battlefield legend, we'll uncover the choices, battles, and betrayals that shaped one of history's most enigmatic figures. Was he a visionary leader, or simply a man driven by insatiable ambition? The answer, as always, lies in the story that follows. Alexander's youth was not merely one of privilege, but of relentless challenge and expectation. His father, King Philip II, was not just a powerful ruler. He was a visionary who transformed Macedonia from a fractured land of feuding clans into the most formidable military force in Greece. Philip saw in Alexander not only a son, but the instrument of his own immortal ambitions. From a young age, Alexander was groomed for greatness. He was surrounded by the sharpest minds of the era, philosophers, generals, and scholars. Most famously, Aristotle himself was summoned to tutor the boy prince. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed a mind as sharp as his sword, studying philosophy, science, literature, and politics, absorbing lessons that would shape his worldview forever. But education alone did not make Alexander a legend. The young prince grew up amidst chaos and court intrigue. His mother, Olympias, fiercely protective and ambitious, fueled his dreams with stories of Achilles and Hercules, whispering that Alexander's bloodline was divine. His father's victories on the battlefield were matched by scandals and betrayals at court. Every day, Alexander learned not just from books, but from the raw, dangerous theatre of power. By the time he was a teenager, Alexander had proven himself in battle, fighting alongside his father, saving his life at Cheronea, and gaining the trust and respect of battle-hardened Macedonian soldiers. Yet even as he gained honor, he knew he was living in the shadow of a king whose ambition seemed boundless. But destiny has always had other plans. The sudden and violent death of King Philip in 336 BC sent shockwaves through the kingdom. At just 20 years old, Alexander ascended the throne. There were rivals everywhere, ambitious generals, suspicious nobles, and rebellious city-states eager to break free from Macedonian rule. In this crucible, Alexander's true character was forged. He moved quickly and decisively, crushing insurrections, executing threats, and sending a chilling message to his enemies. Macedonia would not be divided. The boy king was ready to become a conqueror. The world had yet to see what Alexander could achieve, but the stage was set, and the legend was about to begin. The new king was barely in his 20s, but his ambitions already stretched further than most men could even dream. As the news of Philip's death echoed through Macedonia and beyond, the world held its breath. Would this young Alexander crumble under the pressure, or would he become something more? With the kingdom not yet secured, Alexander wasted no time. He asserted his rule with a boldness that surprised many. His first move to subdue rebellious tribes in the north and reassert Macedonian control over the Greek city-states at Thebes. When the city dared to rise up, Alexander responded with devastating force. The message was clear: the era of hesitation was over. Resistance would not be tolerated. But the heart of Alexander's vision was not in Greece nor even in Macedonia. Like a wildfire, his gaze swept east. The Persian Empire, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, was his true target. For centuries, the Greeks had remembered Persian invasions with bitterness and fear. For Alexander, it was not enough to remember; he wanted to conquer. His army, though smaller than the Persian host, was honed to perfection. Hardened by years of training and unified under his charismatic command, these soldiers were not fighting just for land, but for legend. As they crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, they knew they were embarking on something far greater than mere conquest. It is said that when Alexander landed on Asian soil, he made an offering to the gods and cast his spear into the earth, claiming the continent as his by right. This gesture was more than a symbol. It was a declaration to the world and to himself that he would not turn back. At the river, Granicus Alexander faced his first test, a Persian army blocking his advance. The odds were against him, but with characteristic boldness, Alexander led the charge himself. He plunged into the river, rallying his men to follow. The battle was fierce, but Alexander's courage turned the tide. Victory belonged to Macedonia, and the legend of Alexander as an invincible commander began to take shape. But Asia Minor was only the beginning. As the defeated Persian satraps scattered, Alexander pressed forward, liberating Greek cities long oppressed by Persian rule. In every victory his legend grew, and so did his ambitions. Was it destiny that drove him, or the restless spirit of a young man desperate to outshine his father's legacy? Perhaps both. What is certain is that the world would never be the same. After his stunning victories in Asia Minor, Alexander's journey had only just begun. The world ahead was vast and daunting, an endless sweep of Anatolian plains, powerful cities, and the shadow of the mighty Persian king Darius III. Alexander understood that his reputation preceded him now. As he pushed deeper into Asia, the balance of power was shifting. Some cities opened their gates in awe and fear. Others prepared for war to win here. Brute force would not be enough. He needed the sharpest strategy and the charisma to sway both friend and foe. His next great test awaited at Gordium, the legendary Phrygian city said to be the heart of ancient prophecy. There, an ancient chariot was tied with an impossibly tangled knot. The famous Gordian knot legend said that whoever could untie it would rule all Asia. Alexander, never one for patience or half measures, drew his sword and sliced it in half, declaring that destiny was not for the timid. But destiny would demand far more than bold gestures. As he advanced eastward, Alexander faced the full might of the Persian army at the Battle of Issus. The Persians outnumbered the Macedonians, their banners darkening the horizon. The tension in the air was electric. This was no mere skirmish, but a clash that would decide the fate of empires. On the eve of battle, Alexander walked through his camp, speaking to his men not as a distant king, but as a brother in arms. He reminded them of their homes, their families, and the glories that awaited them. This personal touch ignited the hearts of his soldiers. It was no longer just his conquest, but theirs as well. When the two armies met, it was a storm of chaos and courage. Alexander led a daring cavalry charge straight at Darius himself, breaking through the Persian lines. Darius, stunned by the ferocity of the assault, fled the battlefield, leaving his family and treasures behind. Victory at Issus electrified the ancient world. Alexander was no longer just a conqueror. He was a force of nature, rewriting the map of the world. But with each triumph, the risks grew higher. Ahead lay more challenges, greater dangers, and the tantalizing promise of a legacy that could outlast even the greatest empires. As Alexander swept deeper into Asia, the world started to grasp the true extent of his ambition. His victories were no longer about securing a throne or reclaiming lost territory. He was now chasing something much larger, an immortal legacy. Alexander marched east into the heart of the Persian Empire. After the victory at Issus, the Persian king Darius III was desperate to preserve his rule. He sent envoys with lavish gifts, gold, and promises, offering half his kingdom and even his daughter's hand in marriage. But Alexander, intoxicated by destiny, rejected every offer. He wasn't content with half the world. He wanted it all. The march south to Egypt was brutal, yet transformative. In Egypt, Alexander was greeted not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The people had long resented Persian rule and saw Alexander as a savior. He visited the ancient temple of Amun at Siwa Oasis, crossing treacherous desert terrain with only the stars as his guide. Legend says that after a secret meeting with the oracle, Alexander emerged believing himself the son of Zeus, chosen to change the world. Whether myth or self-made propaganda, this new sense of divine mission electrified his men and mystified his enemies. In Egypt, Alexander founded the city that would bear his name, Alexandria. He envisioned it as a beacon of learning and commerce, a bridge between East and West. The city would soon become one of the greatest metropolises of the ancient world, a testament to Alexander's vision far beyond the battlefield. With Egypt secure, Alexander turned his gaze back to Persia, preparing for the greatest confrontation of his life. Darius, assembling a massive army, was ready to defend his empire at the plains of Gaugamela. The stakes had never been higher. This would be a battle to determine the fate of two civilizations. But even in the face of overwhelming numbers, Alexander's tactics, charisma, and daring proved decisive. The Macedonian phalanx advanced like a living machine, while Alexander himself led a thunderous cavalry charge directly at Darius. Panic tore through the Persian ranks, and Darius, seeing the collapse, fled once more, this time for good. With Gaugamela won, Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the heart of Persia, lay open before Alexander. He marched through the ancient halls of power, awed by treasures and wonders never seen by a Greek before. Yet even as he celebrated, Alexander's gaze was always fixed on the horizon. He was no longer merely a Macedonian king, he was a living legend, and the world trembled at his name. After the fall of Persepolis, Alexander was no longer just a conqueror, he was now the new great king of Persia. The scale of his triumph was unimaginable. A young Macedonian had brought down the world's greatest empire, amassed unthinkable wealth, and was adored as a living legend, but with absolute power came new temptations and challenges. Alexander began to embrace Persian customs, dressing in royal robes, insisting on courtly rituals, and expecting his men to bow before him, something that infuriated his loyal Macedonian officers. To unite his vast empire, Alexander married Roxana, a Persian noblewoman. This union symbolized the merging of Greek and Persian worlds, but it also sparked anger and suspicion among his inner circle. He began to see himself as a god-king, a being above mere mortals. He even demanded recognition as the son of Zeus Ammon. Some say ambition transformed into obsession. Alexander's gaze now turned eastward toward the mysterious lands beyond Persia, dreaming of new horizons. As Alexander pushed ever further east, the familiar world faded behind him. His army now marched into the heart of Central Asia, where the land itself seemed to resist their passage. Vast steppes, searing deserts, and towering mountains became new battlefields, each with its own dangers. The local tribes, Sogdians, Bactrians, and others fought fiercely. Refusing to yield, Alexander was forced to adapt, learning the art of mountain warfare and guerrilla tactics. These were not the orderly battles of Greece, but a test of endurance, will, and cunning. Seeking to bind his diverse empire, Alexander organized mass marriages between his officers and local women, hoping to unite cultures with family ties. Yet, for many Macedonians, this only deepened the sense of being strangers in a strange land. Despite growing fatigue among his troops, Alexander's ambition only grew. He founded new cities, each a beacon of Greek influence, and imagined an empire that stretched to the edges of the world. His vision was no longer just conquest, but the creation of a new civilization. But the further he went, the more isolated he became. Whispers of betrayal, assassination attempts, and the weariness of endless war weighed heavily on both leader and followers. Still, Alexander pressed on, driven by the idea that the greatest glory lies always just beyond the horizon. As Alexander pressed eastward, the horizon seemed limitless, but so did the hardships. The dream of reaching the edge of the world, India, became a new obsession, driving the army ever onward through scorching deserts, dense jungles, and torrential monsoons. But the further they went, the more the strain began to show. Supplies dwindled, the terrain grew harsher, disease and exhaustion took a mounting toll. What began as a grand adventure was now a desperate struggle against nature itself. Finally, in the lush, rain-soaked valleys of the Punjab, Alexander's army met the mighty King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes. It was a test unlike any before. War elephants, towering and unstoppable, clashed against Macedonian phalanxes. The battle was brutal, chaotic, a clash of civilizations. Alexander triumphed, but it was a costly victory. His men, battered and weary, looked to him with haunted eyes. They had marched farther than any Greek or Macedonian had ever dreamed, but now, faced with the endless expanse of India, they reached their limit. For the first time, Alexander's army refused to go any further. Mutiny was in the air. The great conqueror was forced to listen not to his ambitions, but to the will of those who had followed him from the beginning. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Alexander agreed to turn back. He wept not only for the lost chance at new worlds, but perhaps for the first time, he realized the true cost of unrelenting conquest, not only in blood, but in the hearts of those who fought for him. After years on the march, Alexander's exhausted army finally turned for home. They faced new torments, searing heat in the Gedrosian desert, deadly thirst and losses almost as severe as any battle. But the dream of reaching the ends of the earth had faded. As the Macedonians limped back to Babylon, Alexander tried to hold his empire together, arranging new marriages and appointing local governors. He wanted to blend cultures, believing he could rule not just by conquest, but by unity. But his relentless drive alienated his old companions. Some accused him of abandoning Macedonian traditions and adopting Persian excesses. Others resented his increasing paranoia and the execution of friends on suspicion of betrayal. The army that had followed him from the plains of Macedon to the edge of India was now restless and fractured. In 323 BC, at the height of his power, Alexander fell ill after a banquet in Babylon. Feverish and unable to speak, he died days later, just shy of his 33rd birthday. His body would become the prize in a struggle among his generals, and the empire he built began to fragment almost immediately. No one, not even Alexander, could unite the world forever. Yet his legend did not die. Alexander's ambition, vision, and flaws would inspire generations of leaders, storytellers, and dreamers, echoing through time long after his brief, dazzling life ended. When Alexander the Great died, the world held its breath. In his wake, he left no clear successor. His only legitimate son was just an infant, and his generals eyed the throne with ambition. The empire that stretched from Greece to the edges of India was suddenly a prize for the taking, and the most extraordinary Game of Thrones in ancient history began. The empire splintered into pieces. The mighty generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus, and Cassander, each seized a portion, ruling as kings in their own right: Babylon, Egypt, the Seleucid East, and Macedon. Alexander's dream of a united world was lost, but his spirit lived on in the kingdoms that bore his name. The cities he founded, Alexandria in Egypt, in the Middle East, in Central Asia, became centers of learning, science, and culture, blending Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian ideas. The Hellenistic age was born, a fusion of East and West that would echo for centuries. Alexander himself became a legend, praised by Romans and Persians, revered by medieval knights and Islamic scholars, painted by Renaissance masters, immortalized in novels and films. His story is a reminder of the limits of human ambition, the price of greatness, and the power of vision. Even today, his name stands for conquest, genius, and the unquenchable fire of those who dare to dream beyond their own world.